Hey leaders, in this episode of Leading Collaborative Response, Lorna and I dig into the continuum of supports, specifically looking at attendance and behavior. When we look at designing continuums of support in relation to attendance and behavior, we need to adjust our process slightly to be able to get to the root causes. What are the root causes that are impacting attendance and behavior? And then how do we go about supporting that at the school? You're going to love this episode as we give you practical tips for engaging in the creation of a continuum that is owned by your staff team in relation to behavior and attendance. You got to get to the root. Let's get started.
Are you a leader who is navigating the nuances of leading collaborative response in your school or district? Are you unsure of what collaborative response is? Are you looking to understand the critical role leadership plays when establishing and refining a collaborative response approach?
Collaborative response began as a grassroots approach to focus on the needs of students through a framework of collaboration. That approach has grown to a movement that is training leadership and education.
Through the Leading Collaborative Response podcast, Kurtis and I share our own experiences of leading collaborative response and lessons learned as we continue to learn and gain insight through the experiences of working alongside others. We also have the opportunity to engage in conversations with school and divisional leaders implementing the framework in their own organizations.
We know great leaders build great teams because that is what every child deserves. Subscribe to the Leading Collaborative Response podcast and join the thousands of schools seeing success for students through intentional and focused collaborative efforts. And welcome to another week of reflection and insight in relation to a particular topic. As always, I'm Kurtis Hewson, joined by Lorna as well. And this week, we'd like to focus in on getting to the roots when thinking about behavior and attendance. So when we think about the development of a continuum of supports, and this is a topic that we've talked over and over about because we really feel it's critical within our schools that the development of continuums are accomplishing two elements. The first is that we're creating an artifact, a document that's going to help support conversations as we move forward. And it may be conversations with staff members. It may be conversations with parents. It might be conversations with students. But when we're thinking about how do we respond, the continuum becomes a really important anchor resource for that conversation. Now, the second is that the process of initially developing and then continually refining is really about breaking down the stigma that comes with talking about what I do in my classroom and really focuses in on normalizing a conversation about practice. What is it that we do to support students? And by creating and refining and utilizing that continuum, we're creating an ongoing mechanism where that's just a normal part of how we engage in our school.
Well, and it makes a plethora of strategies and ideas accessible by everyone in the school, which is super helpful if you're a new teacher. But even if you're a seasoned teacher, to be able to look at what are all of the possibilities of things that we could be trying to support students in a particular area.
Well, and I can recall teachers with years of experience that are masters in the classroom that still would be able to refer to that continuum and go, oh, right, I could try this, or I used to do this years ago. Why hadn't I thought of that? Well, it's because our classrooms are complex places. Teachers have deep toolboxes, and to remember every single thing that you've learned on how to support students is
over your 30-year career or more.
It's not only overwhelming, I would say it's not a possibility to really think about everything that I know of what to do to support a student. A continuum of supports is really, really critical.
Yeah. So when we think about the continuum, that's that typical development. And usually when we engage in that initial development, we start with the question that is, what do we do when a student struggles with literacy or reading or numeracy or...
Well, we've seen it, schools that have created that continuum for engagement, who have asked, what do we do when a student struggles with executive functioning, and created continuums like that. Even a couple weeks ago, and we're still searching if there's a school that has gone about developing a continuum in relation to English as a second language for us, or our EAL learners. I know that that's an area that one particular school for sure was really looking to refine. So
it's a quick response, really, when we do that initial activity around the sticky notes to respond to that question. What do we do when a student struggles in the area of? And then we start to just pound out a number of ideas and we come up with all kinds of commonalities across the school, which allow us to begin the initial development of our continuum. But when it comes to behavior and attendance, we would say there's one more step.
Right. So that initial question that you posed is really about creating an access point for me to dump my collective toolbox, my instructional toolkit that I use, like you said, on the Post-it notes, just all the different ideas, and we start gathering it to create. But let's talk about that one more step. And we've learned about this by trying to apply that same process when it comes to creating a continuum focused on supporting behavior and a continuum focused on enhancing attendance. Now, those are two, we often say, create continuums in relation to priority areas. So for instance, if you're trying to really focus in on executive functioning, that's a great topic to make a continuum about, because you're essentially saying, what do we already do as an initial starting place? And then when we see gaps, we'll start to fill in those gaps with further resources, professional learning. But when a school says we're really focusing in on behavior, we've tried the same process.
We have.
and it
we
doesn't
end
work.
up with what we would call a pyramid of punishment.
Actually, I heard one school refer to it, and it makes total sense, as the triangle of consequence.
Oh, yes.
Because we ask, what do we do when a student struggles with attendance? And inevitably, it comes to essentially responding to the tip of the iceberg, what we observe. So what do we do when a student struggles with attendance? Well, we see the punitive things that come out, the engagement of a truancy officer. We see tracking for supports. We even, when we made our behavior continuum off the first part, tier 1 was almost the how do we reward and reinforce positive behavior. And again, it came from a good place. But then the next tiers again became intensifying the consequence.
Well, it becomes more difficult to articulate what that support looks like when we're talking
the difference.
About the behavior side of things. We know that, and you would have heard a million times, I'm sure, that phrase that behavior is communication. And so that is key to what we look at in terms of building that continuum of support, which is what Kurtis just pointed out, that support is the word that we want to be able to focus in on.
We'll be right back to continue this episode.
When we establish continuums of support for our school focused on established priorities, we are answering the question of what will we do when faced with questions of how to support the needs of our students. But the creation of these continuums are only the first step. Join us for the online workshop, 10 Considerations when Utilizing and Refining Your Continuums of Support, part of our Support and Collaborative Response series. In this on-demand workshop, I will share 5 ways to effectively utilize your continuum of supports within your school, and 5 ways to further refine your continuums to ensure maximum impact. I'll also be sharing numerous resources, templates, and samples. Access this on-demand workshop, and you'll have the ability to view and replay all or any portion of the workshop when it best fits your time. Register today to learn more about refining and utilizing your continuum of supports, an integral part of a school's collaborative response.
And now back to our conversation.
So if we identify the behaviors that we're seeing, and then what we're going to do about those behaviors, we automatically go to a consequence.
Yeah.
But when we consider those behaviors, then take the extra step to say, what's actually behind those behaviors?
What is that behavior
What is it
communicating potentially?
Yeah. And what are the possibilities of that communication? What could it be that they're hungry, or they're tired, or they're emotionally stressed, or they're anxious? Like, there's so many things behind those behaviors. So let's identify those and then think about, how do we respond and provide support in the area of anxiety?
So getting to the root causes. Yeah. Okay, so let's break this down for a really specific example.
Yeah.
Let's say that we've kept to what do we do when a student struggles with behavior, and we identify that one of the behaviors that we are seeing is destruction of property. Okay, it's one of the things that I'm struggling with in my classroom when I've got a student or some students that are carving into the table, or writing across books, or ripping things. Destruction of property. So if we had gone where we started with first and say, what do you do when a student is destroying property? It would again go to the reaction, your consequence of
going to the office, phoning home,
or I isolate them in a particular space. I remove certain materials from the student. And again, not all of this is bad, but it's how are we responding to the destroying behavior?
Well, and sometimes you have to do those things in the meantime.
Oh, of course.
But you want to be able to explore further in what is actually behind that destruction.
So getting to the why. Okay, so let's kind of break this down a bit. So what could be some reasons why, and we may not know for certain, but what could be some of the reasons underlying that destruction of property? One thing could be frustration with task in the classroom. It's easier to go to this behavior than to engage in a task that they're not knowing how to do.
It could be that they are distracted by other noises in the classroom and they can't focus in on the work, so they get frustrated.
It could be that they are having some anxiety in relation to peers, and rather than deal with that, they go to this. So you can see we're basically brainstorming what could be some root underlying causes, and then we want to go to, okay, if avoidance of task might be the underlying root, how could we respond? What do we do? And now we start identifying what are the different supports we could put into place for that. And then from those supports, now start tiering to say, what are the things we would do for all students, some students with that as well.
Yeah. So it does take that extra little step. And we've got a number of resources that help you to really reflect on that idea of, what are the things that we're seeing? What are the behaviors that you're seeing? And then to take the time to explore, what could that possibly be communicating to you? And it's that communication piece that we want to provide a response to.
So again, we started this off by saying when we make continuums related to behavior or attendance is really the same thing of what are the things that we're seeing in regards to attendance struggles. So for instance, coming to class on time.
Yeah.
Okay. Now we want to again think about, well, what could be underlying that? Is it personal organization? Is it executive functioning skills that we're looking at? Is it unclear communication?
Could be simply their schedule.
Yeah.
Reviewing their schedule.
And then we want to be able to go and say, okay, for those underlying causes, how could we help support? Same principle when we're thinking about, again, creating a continuum in relation to responding to attendance or behavior. So as noted, we do have some resources that we will share out with this as well. Please reach out if you have examples of continuums that you've developed in these particular areas. We always love seeing the great work that is happening in schools. And thank you once again for all that you do for your students, your staff teams, and your educational communities. Until next time, take care, everyone.
See you soon.
For more on collaborative response, visit jigsawlearning.ca or join the JL Insider to receive access to newly added resources and content. Make sure to follow us on social media. Subscribe to the podcast and the Jigsaw Learning YouTube channel to access past and upcoming episodes. Join us again to continue to build your own capacity and leading collaborative response in your context.